The city of Voronezh, stop, house of the architect, the former children's world, abandoned underground passage, for staircases connected by 2 wide concrete pipes. In the middle of one found the mangled corpse of a young man. During a search of the remains of his outer clothing, among other personal belongings, a 16-gigabyte flash drive with 1 text document, a letter to an unknown addressee, and several photographs were found. The text contained in the document is unabridged. The photographs are classified and cannot be published. The hardest part was thinking about everything and deciding to write this. A psychologist told me I should write when I get scared. Sorry for the weird start. I can't stop and think about what I've written. Time is getting short. The weirdest thing to do in my situation is to sit down at the computer and write about what happened, but I can't calm down otherwise. I'm pounding. My legs refuse to walk. I can't call you. I can't text you. I feel like I'm in danger of having my calls tapped and my internet access monitored. Believe me, I don't want to set you up and even less put you in danger, but I have to warn you, no matter what it costs me. You may remember that I have a door jamb peeking out from behind a closet at the end of the hallway. The thing is, before our family came here, some government official lived in this apartment. He punched a hole in the wall and connected the 2 apartments to maximize the living space. Then he went to jail. When we moved in, we welded the door shut. My mom was going to wallpaper it, but it didn't work out. And then when she and my dad died, I didn't care about that stuff. Don't laugh, I'm not being mystifying. The apartment on the other side of the door seems to be a bad one. The official was jailed shortly after the merger. That's the first thing. 2 brothers, some kind of installers, lived there before him, and both of them hanged themselves on the same bar in the middle of the corridor a couple weeks after the move. That's the second thing. I don't know who lived there before them, but my downstairs neighbor says that there have been various stories about it since the early noughties. They say there's radioactive fittings buried in the wall, People walk, sleep, eat, and gradually go crazy and die. I also asked a grandmother I knew at the bus stop. She said that in the late 90s, some maniac held 3 street children there, chained them to 3 radiators in the room so that they could not reach each other, and left them to die. After all these stories, I felt uneasy. I walk along the corridor, squinting at that door, and everything in my chest is covered with frost. I bought an iron deadbolt in the hardware store. I fixed this iron to the door, for screws spoiled, but it seemed to be firmly planted. But it didn't help me. I look at this construction and, sometimes you look at a young mother with a stroller and then she stops for a second, takes her hand away to get a phone or scratch her nose, and you look at the stroller, which no one is holding, and your heart shrinks with horror. The mother seems to be near, a few centimeters away, but she's not holding the stroller. And here, everything seems to be in place, the welding seam, the latch, but it's like something's wrong. So I put a closet behind the door, stuffed it with junk for weight, and it seemed to ease up. And then last week, a couple days after we last saw each other, I heard someone banging on the door. It was in the morning. I just opened my eyes, woke up before my alarm clock, and there was something pounding on the door. I was definitely sewn to the sheet. I couldn't even move. I thought to myself that this evil from the empty apartment was hungry and came to me. And then I heard first a loud cough and then conversations. I let go, figured the evil apartment had gotten new tenants. But here's the thing. I hear voices and a nasty cough, whistling and wet at the same time. But I can't make out the words, and then I couldn't. It was as if I was dying of dementia. The sounds were familiar, the intonations were familiar, and the audibility was good, but I couldn't understand the meaning of the phrases. The same day, I met a neighbor who lives across the stairwell and asked her if she knew anything about the new tenants. She just shrugged her shoulders and went downstairs. And in the evening, when I came home from work, while I was looking for my keys in my pocket, I looked at the neighbor's door by accident, and just imagine, at that very moment, as I turned my head, someone laughed from the other side. It was mocking, like he was trying to scare me, and I foolishly laughed back, also with such a sinister intonation. Suddenly, the iron door rattled for another 5 seconds. I was sweating. I almost bit my lip from horror, quickly opened my door and locked myself from inside. Then I calmed down a little, but I still had a bad feeling because after all, I'd lived here longer than them, and the newcomers, were scaring me. I jumped out of bed in the middle of the night. Believe me, I'm writing this now, and my fingers are freezing. You can't even imagine how scared I am. I wish I hadn't gone crazy. In the middle of the night, I jumped out of bed, and I don't understand what happened. In my head, at once, a quiet, hoarse whisper reminded me of the golden rule that if you wake up at night without a reason, then someone is looking at you. And I couldn't see anything at all. The darkness was absolute. I couldn't even see my own hands. I started patting my cheeks, and they were covered in goosebumps. My forehead is in sweat, my throat is dry, and my soul is on fire. I feel that I'm going to wail with horror, but I'm even more afraid to make a sound. And then there's laughter right underneath me. Oh God, I am now all cold. It's terrible to write this, from top to toe like needles. Imagine how I felt that night. Quiet laugh, but still mocking. I hit the floor, fell unluckily. My knee hit the wall, but I got over it. I jumped to the light switch, slammed it, thinking that the creature would be right in my face. But the room was empty, not a soul except for me, all wet and shivering like in the cold. So I thought about the situation. I couldn't understand how someone could laugh under me. I have a prefabricated bed. Remember? No base, mattress on particle board, and they're on 3 legs. There's no way to get under me except by lifting the mattress and slipping through the cracks. So I'm standing there, thinking about it, and I feel my knees start to shake. Apparently, my subconscious has already figured it out, but I haven't had time to follow it yet. And suddenly, like a burned man, I ran out of the bedroom, grabbed a knife in the kitchen, and huddled in the corner. I thought that the laughing ghoul had lifted the bed, climbed under it, and then it hit the floor, which woke me up. I sat in the corner for about 10 minutes, if not more, and then on woozy legs I went to the front door, checked the locks, made sure everything was locked. I slipped into the living room, turned on the music on the computer so that I wouldn't be scared, and went with a firm step with a knife in my hand straight after the monster. Barely lifted the bed and mattress, but found no one. The next night I invited Larissa to visit. She brought her corgi with her. She said, "Let him run around while we watch a movie." I kept thinking whether to tell her about the night or not. She'd think I was some kind of coward, but I decided to. She immediately calmed me down, said that often at the boundaries of sleep, when almost asleep or just awake, people hear different sounds. For example, if you think of your grandfather calling you by name, you hear his voice clearly. Or you remember the melody of the alarm clock and shudder at it, even though the room is silent. I've got laughter imprinted in my memory. And you know what? It's been a relief. I had already cursed myself 3 times for the fact that instead of acting, I was spinning on the spot like a weather vane, becoming paranoid or fearless rationalist. But unfortunately, the calm didn't last long. We were sitting in front of the TV in the living room when Larissa's corgi brought an eye in its teeth. I took a picture of it. It's not a prop or a similar piece of chicken, but a real eye, and the dog's face was covered in blood. We thought he had hurt himself, but he didn't even whimper. He put this abomination next to us and sat down next to us. Larissa, in a panic, dragged the pet to the bathroom, washed, wiped, once again examined whether there were no wounds. In the meantime, I could not find a place to myself as a wounded man ran around the apartment, in all corners looked, and as if an unknown force I was confused, you just think, did not bother to check behind the closet in the hallway. I don't remember what I said to Larissa, apologizing for something, looking for an explanation, but my thoughts were confused and my tongue was slurred. I walked her to the bus stop, and as soon as I came back, I went to the closet as if I'd had an epiphany. And there's blood all over the welded door. Don't think I'm confused or nervous. All the photos are on the flash drive. And the blood isn't stained. It's oozing out of the cracks in the sides. I must have cramped up. I reached for the brass knob in disgust, yanked, and the door gave way. There was no welding seam, but now there was a trickle of red, something stuck and squelching in the bottom crack. It was rotten bits of meat, and I somehow doubt very much that it belonged to any known animal. And the damn door, it seemed so flimsy and unreliable. It was only the deadbolt I had put on it that kept out the filth that was trying so hard to get into my apartment from the other side. And that smell. It was the stench of meat left in a cellophane bag for a week. The stench made my temples ache, and viscous streams of vomit rumbled in my chest. I rushed to the computer, wanting to write to Larissa. The guilt eating me up from the inside was intermingled with a soul-scorching horror. It was very uncomfortable that her dog could have been poisoned by rotten meat planted by the neighbors, but at the same time I understood that to worry about it in my position. Unspeakable stupidity. I moved the mouse. The monitor lit up, and what I saw broke something inside me. On the screen, in big letters, it read, "Remove the lock, bastard." I believe those who claim to have turned gray with horror overnight. It was as if an electric current had been passed through my hair, and I shook like a condemned man in the electric chair. In a fit, I dropped the keyboard from the table, broke the mug of coffee I'd finished drinking, twisted like a wounded man in the stomach, and almost choked on the lump in my throat. The phone rang like ammonia on me. Pulling myself together, I picked up the receiver, not even noticing that the call was from a hidden number. A quiet, elderly voice in an orderly tone muttered, "Don't you dare call anyone, asshole." I didn't finish listening, dropped the call, and with trembling fingers dialed 02. There was a beeping, then the unpleasant clatter of the receiver hitting the plastic case, and then I heard a voice, "I told you, don't you dare, asshole." The words flew into my head like a bullet. I could hardly get up, went out into the hallway, took my jacket, wanted to leave the apartment, but when I took the key, I heard laughter in the entrance. If I could go back to the past and give myself a ringing slap, to drive away from the peephole, not to let me see that mind-tearing creature that occupied the stairwell. God, I dread to think of this embodiment of ugliness. I may be wrong about the details, but it's impossible to be wrong about the outline. Colorful yellow pipes covered with black feathers and wriggling like earthworms stretched from the neighboring apartment to a large, door-sized, furry lump. From this epicenter of the abomination sprouted thin, fly-like legs and brown, curved outgrowths that looked like charred stumps of human hands. The whole thing wriggled, shook, curled into impossible shapes and stretched, emitting black smoke. I still wish I'd taken a picture of it. I turned away from the peephole and rushed to the other end of the corridor to check the deadbolt, when suddenly I found that my face and hands were covered with a disgusting gray film that looked like milk foam. I peeled it off, threw it on the floor, and ran to the deadbolt. The door, whistling with blood-smeared hinges, was jangling back and forth. The deadbolt still held, but the pair of self-tapping screws holding it in place were already gleaming at the top of the threads, as if to tell me that I couldn't linger in the apartment any longer. But where could I go? After all, the horrible degenerate was still laughing in the stairwell. So I barricaded both doors and locked myself in the living room, sat down at my computer, and started writing this. I promise I'll try to find some way to seal this nightmare as soon as possible and keep it from spreading any further. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Just make sure you save the pictures. My apartment is already filled with the damned miasma of this nasty stuff that leaked from the neighboring apartment. But I feel that while I'm writing, stuck to the monitor, they can't get to me. It makes it easier to relive the nightmare around me. Now I intend to save everything, climb out the window onto the roof of the store, jump to the ground. And, it's like I can feel that I'm being guarded under the windows. That laughing freak will definitely come after me. There's no doubt about it. But I've figured out a way to confuse him. I'm gonna run across the road in the crosswalk. All I have to do is make up my mind. I'll drop the flash drive in your mailbox. And if you're reading this right now, I did it, and not all is lost.